Let's start this video at the very beginning. At the beginning, there was the sun. And the sun at golden hour was beautiful. Everyone loved how it looked. And then photography came along. And us crazy photographers decided we'd like to work inside sometime. That's when all the trouble started. Hi, I'm Hayward. Welcome to the channel. We are going to simplify the entire problem of indoor lighting for photography in this video. Really, we can do it in one video. I can do it in such a way that you understand what you're trying to do when you try and deal with all the technicalities of indoor studio lighting. Today, I'm going to go over 3-point studio lighting and variations, because one person's 3-point studio lighting is not another person's 3-point studio lighting. That's okay. It's going to be fine. You're going to come out of this much more comfortable and have a better grounding in studio lighting. Let's get started. I believe every photographer can do beautiful studio lighting. I'm going to simplify the concepts of what the lights do. And once you understand what you're trying to do with a light, you can see when you've achieved it or not. The 3 lights we're going to be talking about today is the key light, the fill light, and the backlight. The key light, as I said at the beginning, talking about the sun, can be thought of very simply as the sun. It should hit the subject's face as the sun would, from the angle, direction, whatever you want for your photograph. The key light should be that imitation of the sun. Fill light is the light that hits every area not hit by the key light. So we've got this big light on my face here, that's my key light. I've got shadows down here. That, whatever level that is the fill light. Guess what? I don't have a fill light on right now, but I do have a fill light because the room has some light. The fill light is your ambient light level. It determines the depth of your shadow. That's it. That's all it does. The backlight illuminates the background or separates the subject from the background. There's an edge over here of a window light that sort of provides an edge light on me and a little bit of light on the background. I don't have a backlight other than that right now, but it serves that function. You see what I'm saying? Sometimes these lights aren't formal. You have to understand the function. So when you're trying to look at a scene photographically, you understand if you already have some help and maybe just need one light, or you have no help and you're in a dark room and you need all 3. In order to illustrate all of these technical points, I'm going to do 2 things in this video. One, I'm going to show you the process of me setting up the lights in my studio for a headshot session. The other thing I'm going to do is use this whiteboard where I can draw the positions of all the lights to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. So to get started, let's get our position here. Let's get our camera position here and our subject here. You will excuse my drawing. I am not doing this for fine art purposes. Okay, first let's start with the diagram here of where exactly the key light goes. In my setup for the headshot I'm doing, the key light will be right here and it will be a very large softbox. So there's the key light over here, subject, camera. Now, have a look at how I set the key light up in the studio. My key light is a 1200 watt second strobe with a 60-inch softbox. I'm using Pocket Wizard triggers to trigger it. They're fully manual, no TTL or automation at all. Okay, now let's show the fill light. The fill light in the session I'm using is not going to be a light at all. It's going to be a reflector. And that reflector will be right here next to subject. It's just a simple white reflector on a stand. It's nothing complicated at all. Like I said in the beginning, fill light just determines how deep your shadows are. You can do that by reflecting light, or you can do it by adding a light. In this case, my key light lights the subject from a 45-degree angle onto the side, just like this light is here, and slightly higher. then it reflects back from this reflector here onto the subject. A reflector is probably the easiest way to learn fill light because you don't have another light to balance for exposure. It's the simplest way to start dealing with fill because you just move it in and out and the shadows get deeper or lighter. Okay, have a quick look at how I set the fill light up for this session. My fill light reflector is a really simple 60-inch, white on one side, silver on the other reflector that I raised to a good height on a stand. You want a nice size reflector so you don't have to worry about coverage. It's really convenient to have white and silver options for the amount of fill. So what if you actually wanted to use a fill light instead of a reflector? Where would that go? It would go probably behind the camera on the other side of the key light, and the light comes this way. So instead of this reflector, if you wanted to use a fill light, here it is next to camera. Usually I put it behind, so it's well behind the camera, and you would adjust it to change the shadow level you want for your shadows. That's it. I'm not showing a fill light in this video, but that's the overall function if you would want to use one. Okay, let's take this fill light out of my little diagram here because we're not going to be using it for this session. So I'm just going to erase it right out of here. Okay, remember how I had two types of fill light? Well, now I'm going to talk about the two ways that I can use backlight in this session, either to light the background or as an edge light for the subject. During a headshot session, or almost any session for me, I do different things. I go for different looks, depends on what I'm doing, depends on the subject, whatever. So let's break this down into the diagram. So first, let's draw where the background is here. It's right along this line. Okay, first I'm going to talk about a light that illuminates the background. In the case of this session, I used a strobe with a grid. And here's a quick view of how I set it up. The backlight is a 400 watt-second strobe with a set of barn doors and a grid to keep the beam focused nicely on the background. And let me draw on the diagram where it goes. So here's the true background light. Camera, subject, key, reflector or fill. Background light illuminates the background. It's got that grid on it like you saw in the setup video. Now let's do the option for an edge or separator light. Here is how I set that up. Okay, this strobe is also 400 watt seconds. It's got a 3-foot softbox with egg crate on it, which allows directional light because it's going to be an edge light. I don't need a trigger on this one because it's an optically triggered strobe off the other lights. Now, let me show on the diagram where that edge light would be. Okay, so here's our background light, illuminates the background. Here is the edge light. It is opposite the key light, and it lights this edge of the subject, so it looks like it's just a little edge light of shine around the subject to separate them from the background, so you can see that they don't blend into the background. A lot of times when you see photography, the subject kind of blends into the background, and the edge light is to avoid doing that. Okay, well, we have all the lights in position, but that doesn't really tell us how to take a photograph with these lights, right? You need to do that exposure thing. I'm not even going to candy coat it. To do this easily, to save yourself a lot of heartache, you're going to need to get one of these. It's an incident meter, flash meter. Some do just incident, some do flash, but you want a flash meter that can measure flash when you trigger it. Okay, I've done other videos on this. I'm not going to go into the function of the meter, but I am going to show you how to meter for the setup we just did. And there's two ways to do it. One is to meter for the main exposure at the subject position, and this is how you do that. Okay, and here's how you measure that exposure. From the client position, bulb out on your meter facing camera, trigger the flash, and there's your exposure. The other way to meter exposure is to meter an individual light so you know exactly how much light that's putting on a subject. And here's how you do that. So the first thing you want to do is turn your light meter's dome in and then face the dome towards the light source. Trigger your light and measure your exposure. There it is. Let's be clear on this. When this dome is out, it's taking in all the exposure that is hitting whatever this is in front of. So if I put this by my face, it's doing all the exposure. You see, it's got that shape. It's taking light from all around. If you put this dome in, as you just saw, and aim it at a light, it will tell you how much light just from that light is hitting where you are. Does that make sense? That's an important difference, because if you do 4 lights at f8 and you do the dome out, you're going to find your exposure is probably a lot hotter than f8 because all the lights are adding up. That's an important distinction. It seems kind of simple, but I've seen a lot of people get stuck on that when they're setting their exposure for flash. Okay, so we've got all our lights in position. We've got our exposure set. As you saw, I chose f8 for this. Your mileage may vary, you can choose your exposure, but you've seen the process of how to use the lights to get your exposure. Now I'm going to show a little behind the scenes of the session, what it was like to work with this setup a little bit. I'm all over the place in the session, so it's kind of a very free-form thing. Once I've got my lights set, it's all about the interaction between myself and the client to get emotion and a good look. Also, I'll show a couple of images here of how the lights play on the subject's face. So to review, 3 lights in multiple forms. The key light is your main illumination, your main exposure. The fill is how deep are your shadows, or how great is your contrast between shadow and light. And the background is either to be able to see the background or to separate the subject from the background. Very quick video, but it's really pretty simple. Don't get caught up in the technical aspects of how to set an exposure and this, and understand what you're trying to do, and you'll find your way so much quicker than to try and look at it as a math problem. It is a math problem, but it's not really. It's art, and you just have to understand what you're trying to do. I hope you got something out of this. I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. I love doing studio photography, so if you want me to dive more in depth on any piece of this, just let me know. I love to do these kinds of videos. Thank you so much for watching. I hope if you enjoyed the video, you would give it a like and maybe subscribe to the channel. Until the next video, cheers.